The smell of turned earth still takes me back sometimes. Not just the rich, loamy scent of a good spring planting, but the bitter, metallic tang of soil upturned by a bulldozer. The kind that digs into the foundations of everything you thought was solid. That smell, it's etched into my memory. A ghost of a warning from a time I was too blind to see. I'm Samuel Miller, but most folks just call me Sam. 40 years old, and my roots run deeper into this Iowa soil than any of the oaks lining the creek bed. This farm, it's been in my family for generations. My grandfather built the west barn, my father the new silo. I learned to walk among the corn rows, to talk to the sky, to understand the language of the seasons. My life was simple, predictable, and profoundly good. Or so I thought. My best friend, Noah, he was more like a brother. We'd shared everything since we were kids, scraped knees, first crushes, the hard work of harvest, the quiet contemplation of winter. He knew my hopes, my fears, every dusty corner of this farm. Who'd sat on that old porch swing countless nights, dreaming of the future, not grand, world-changing dreams, but steady, honest ones. Dreams of good yields, healthy cattle, a thriving community. Our community, which, like many rural towns, had been slowly, subtly wilting around the edges. Businesses closing, young people leaving. The kind of slow decline you only notice when you look back. That was the landscape Lena walked into. She arrived like a vibrant bloom in winter, a splash of color against the muted tones of our fading town. Lena Dubois, a consultant, she introduced herself, sent by some state initiative to revitalize struggling local economies. She was striking, not just beautiful but sharp, with eyes that seemed to take in everything and miss nothing. Her suits were always tailored perfectly, a stark contrast to my worn denim and practical boots. She spoke of innovation, sustainable growth, leveraging local assets. Her words were a balm to a town hungry for hope, a promise that our quiet way of life wasn't destined to fade into obsolescence. I was smitten, I admit it. Like a teenager, her intellect, her vision, her ability to articulate a future for our small corner of the world, it was intoxicating. She'd spend hours on my farm, asking about crop rotation, soil health, the challenges of modern agriculture. I'd never met anyone who listened with such intense focus, who seemed to genuinely care about the intricate dance between man and land. She made me feel seen, valued, not just as a farmer, but as a person with insights and knowledge. She spoke of grander possibilities for our farm, not just as a place to grow corn and soybeans, but as a hub, a model for sustainable agriculture that could draw people in, create jobs. It was exciting, terrifying, and utterly captivating. Noah, always a man with a restless spirit beneath his easygoing exterior, was equally impressed. He had always yearned for something more than the cyclical rhythms of farm life, something grander than tending fields. Lena, with her big ideas and confident stride, seemed to speak directly to that unfulfilled ambition in him. She'd invite us both to meetings in town, asking for our input, making us feel like vital partners in her grand plan. Looking back, I can see the subtle shift, the way her gaze would linger on Noah a little longer, the way she'd weave his ideas into her presentations, elevating them, while mine, though always acknowledged, seemed to be gently steered back to the practicalities of the soil. I dismissed it then. Just different perspectives, I told myself. She was a visionary, and I was Sam the farmer. The first real tremor of unease began subtly, a faint rumble beneath the familiar ground. Lena started holding more private meetings, not just with me, but with individual landowners, community leaders. She seemed to be building a network, a web, and I was proud that she sought my input. But then questions would start surfacing in town gatherings, veiled critiques of current farming practices, hushed concerns about the long-term viability of small, independent farms like mine. These weren't overt attacks, just whispers, insinuations. They felt like tiny pebbles dropped into a still pond, creating ripples of doubt. One evening, after Lena had presented a preliminary plan for a new agro-tourism and wellness center, a grand complex that promised to bring jobs and visitors to our struggling town, she stayed late at my farm. We sat on the porch, the crickets chirping a melancholic tune. She had a way of leaning in, her voice low and conspiratorial, making you feel like you were privy to some exclusive truth. She started talking about the need for bold leadership, for people willing to make difficult but necessary sacrifices for progress. She looked at me, her eyes intense, and said, "Sam, your farm, your land, it's the heart of this community, but it's also, if we're honest, a very traditional operation. Does it truly have the potential to scale, to become the engine this town needs without significant radical change?" She paused, letting the words hang in the air. Noah, now, he has a different kind of vision. He sees the potential for something grander, something that might require stepping away from the familiar. A cold knot formed in my stomach. She wasn't just talking about my farming practices anymore. She was talking about my land, my legacy. I tried to push back, to to explain the value of tradition, the careful balance of sustainable farming that had fed generations. But she just smiled, a practiced, almost pitying smile. "Sentimental attachments are beautiful, Sam," she said, her voice soft but firm, "but they don't always pay the bills. Noah understands the imperative of progress." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. It was a pressure, a subtle but insistent force pushing me towards something I didn't understand. I tried to talk to Noah about it, to express my discomfort. He seemed distant, preoccupied. He'd nod distractedly and say, "Lena just sees the bigger picture, Sam. We can't stay stuck in the past. Things have to change." His words, echoing Lena's, twisted that knot tighter. He wasn't just echoing her. He was believing her. He was starting to see me, his best friend, through her eyes, as someone resistant to progress, holding back the tide. The psychological pressure mounted steadily. Lena started arranging meetings with just Noah, excluding me, saying they were discussing specific project logistics that didn't pertain to my current operation. Noah became increasingly secretive, evasive when I asked him what they were planning. He'd snap at me, something he'd never done before, accusing me of being negative or unwilling to embrace change. The isolation grew. I felt like I was standing on shifting sand, watching my best friend drift away, pulled by an unseen current. The key moment, the point where the ground truly opened beneath me, came with a formal proposal. Lena scheduled a special town hall meeting, inviting everyone. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation. She unveiled her final plan, a massive, multifaceted development called Harmony Fields, a blend of upscale housing, commercial spaces, and yes, an agro-tourism experience. She projected glossy renderings on the screen, sleek modern buildings, manicured lawns, a sanitized version of rural life. And right in the heart of her grand vision, prominently featured in every rendering, was my farm. Not my farm as it was, but a reimagined, restructured, utterly unrecognizable version of it. My heart hammered against my ribs. I felt a cold dread creep up my spine. This was it. This was what she had been hinting at. This was the radical change. During the Q&A, I stood up, my voice trembling slightly. I asked about the land, my land. I asked how this development, which seemed to swallow up prime agricultural soil, aligned with her promises of sustainable growth for existing farms. Lena smiled, a practiced, confident smile. "Sam, your farm is an essential component of Harmony Fields," she said, her voice smooth and reassuring. "We envision it as the anchor, providing fresh produce, a living museum of sorts, but to achieve that, we need a unified vision. A single steward of the land to ensure consistency and scale." Then she paused, and her gaze shifted to Noah, who was sitting beside her at the front table, looking down at his hands. "And that steward," she announced, her voice ringing with triumphant clarity, "will be our project partner, Noah Vance." A collective gasp went through the room. I felt the blood drain from my face. Noah, my head swam. I couldn't breathe. It was like a punch to the gut, winded, nauseating. I looked at Noah, his face pale, eyes fixed on the floor. "Noah," I heard myself say, my voice a strangled whisper, "is this true? You're partnering with her to develop my land?" He slowly raised his head, his eyes haunted, guilt etched onto his features. He just nodded, a slight, almost imperceptible movement. "Sam, she convinced me," he mumbled, barely audible. "She said it was the only way, for the town, for progress." Then Lena stood, stepping forward, radiating an almost predatory confidence. She placed a reassuring hand on Noah's shoulder, a gesture that felt sickeningly possessive. Her voice, usually so charming and persuasive, hardened, losing all pretense of warmth. "Sentimental attachments won't save this town, Sam," she stated, her words like icicles. She pulled out a stack of documents. "Noah understands progress. He understands the economic realities. These are the pre-negotiated contracts. The land is appraised at market value, and the deal is, frankly, more than fair, considering its current yield limitations and the declining market for traditional farming." She gestured to the papers. "The agreements are ready. For your signature, Sam." The room erupted in murmurs, some shocked, some angry, some confused, but I heard none of it. Her words, "Sentimental attachments won't save this town," echoed in my ears, drowning out everything else. It wasn't just the land. It was the legacy, the trust, the friendship. Generations of it. Severed with a single, cold, dismissive sentence, the betrayal cut deeper than any tractor blade. Striking at the very core of who I was, my vision blurred. I felt lightheaded, a dizzying emptiness spreading through my chest. The world, as I knew it, had just ceased to exist. The days that followed were a blur of grief and disbelief. I walked my fields feeling like a ghost on my own land. Every furrow, every fence post, every creak of the barn seemed to mock me, whispering of what I was about to lose. The silence from Noah was deafening. He tried to call a few times, leaving messages full of stammering apologies and justifications, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. The thought of his voice, his betrayal, made me feel physically ill. Lena, on the other hand, was relentless. Her lawyers sent letters, her associates called, pushing for a quick resolution, citing the urgent need for progress. I found myself sitting on that old porch swing, the one Noah and I had shared so many dreams on, staring out at the fields, tears streaming down my face. 40 years of my life, every memory, every aspiration seemed to be crumbling around me. I felt like a fool, an old relic easily manipulated, easily cast aside. The pain was physical, a constant ache in my chest, a hollowness that threatened to consume me. I lost weight, I couldn't sleep. My hands, usually steady and strong, trembled. One morning I walked out to the old oak tree that stood sentinel at the edge of my property, its gnarled branches reaching towards the sky like ancient arms. My grandfather had planted it. My father had carved our initials into its bark. My son, if I'd ever had one, would have played beneath its shade. And Lena wanted to rip it all up, replace it with sterile concrete and manicured hedges, all under the guise of progress. As I stood there, leaning against the rough bark, something shifted within me. The despair, the self-pity began to recede, replaced by a fierce, burning anger, not just anger at Lena or even at Noah, but at myself, for being so naive, so trusting, so willing to believe in someone who saw nothing but dollar signs where I saw life. I looked at my land, really looked at it, not as something I might lose, but as something precious, something worth fighting for. This wasn't just a farm, it was my identity, my heritage, my soul. And in that moment, under the gaze of that ancient oak, I made a silent vow. They wouldn't take it, not without a fight. The first step was to find a lawyer, one who understood rural property law, who wouldn't be intimidated by Lena's slick city attorneys. It took time and money I barely had. I drained my savings, sold a piece of old equipment. The legal battle was brutal, protracted, and incredibly draining. Lena's team was formidable, armed with endless paperwork, expert testimonies about highest and best use, and a relentless drive to paint me as an obstacle to the town's prosperity. They tried to portray my attachment to the land as an emotional weakness, a childish refusal to face reality. But I refused to back down. I reached out to neighbors, to other farmers who saw the threat Lena's development posed, not just to my farm, but to the agricultural character of our entire region. Many had been swayed by Lena's initial charm, but they started to see the cracks, the cold ambition beneath the polished veneer. We formed a small grassroots coalition, organizing town meetings, circulating petitions, educating people about the long-term environmental and community costs of such rapid, unplanned development. We spoke of food security, of local economies, of preserving our way of life. The financial strain was immense. There were times I honestly thought I would lose everything, not just the farm, but my home, my future. But every time I felt like giving up, I'd remember Lena's dismissive smile, her cold words, and the image of Noah's guilt-ridden face. It fueled me. It hardened my resolve. It took nearly 2 years. 2 years of sleepless nights, countless legal documents, hostile confrontations, and the gnawing anxiety of uncertainty. But we won. Not a complete victory, perhaps, as some small parcels of land near the town border were rezoned, but my ancestral farm, the heart of my property, remained mine. The proposed Harmony Fields development, stripped of its core acreage, fell apart. Lena, with her grand vision thwarted, eventually packed her bags and left town, moving on to find new communities to revitalize. Noah, disgraced and isolated, quietly left too, disappearing without a trace, leaving behind only the echoing silence of a broken friendship. The farm was saved, but the battle left its scars. Financially, I was devastated. Emotionally, I was raw. The trust I had once so freely given was shattered, replaced by a cautious skepticism. But in the wreckage, something new began to grow. I started small, focusing on sustainable practices, embracing organic farming methods that had always felt right but that I'd previously thought impractical. I partnered with local restaurants, selling directly to consumers through a farmer's market, building genuine connections with people who cared about where their food came from. I became an advocate, helping other farmers navigate environmental regulations, sharing my experience in community organizing. We started a local land trust, ensuring that future generations would have a voice in protecting our agricultural heritage. My circle of friends changed. The old bonds with Noah were irrevocably broken, a gaping wound that might never truly heal. But in its place, I found new bonds, forged in the fires of shared struggle. People who had stood by me, who understood the value of a handshake and an honest day's work, who saw the true wealth in healthy soil and a thriving community, not just in speculative development. I learned to discern true loyalty from opportunistic ambition, the genuine warmth of connection from the cold, calculating glint in someone's eyes. The farm is doing better than ever now, not in terms of grand expansion, but in its health, its vitality, its purpose. The corn still grows tall, the soybeans still unfurl their leaves to the sun, but now there's a new energy, a renewed sense of commitment. I walk my fields, not with the heavy dread of impending loss, but with a quiet pride, a deep appreciation for the land and for the life it sustains. Sometimes when the wind blows just right, I can still catch a whiff of that bitter, metallic tang of earth disturbed, a ghost of a warning. And I remember the pain, the betrayal, the fear, but I also remember the strength I found, the resilience I didn't know I possessed. My spirit was hardened, yes, but ultimately unbroken. I learned that my heritage, my integrity, and the quiet dignity of an honest life rooted in the land are worth fighting for, worth saving, worth more than any price. And that, I've come to understand, is the truest harvest of all.